In the heart of an alien world where the jungle devours everything, one human refused to let go. This isn't just survival, it's the beginning of something impossible. The legend begins now. The jungle of Nexus Prime was a cathedral of nightmares and beauty. Massive trees, their trunks black as obsidian and smooth as glass, rose hundreds of feet into an emerald sky. Their canopies strangled the sunlight into broken shards, letting only streaks of green fire slip through. The air was thick, wet, alive, a soup of humidity and organic decay that carried the scent of pollen, blood, and ozone. Major Mason Thorne adjusted the filters on his respirator and muttered under his breath, 6 days on this rock and I still can't tell if it's trying to feed me or eat me. His voice vanished into the dense, throbbing soundscape of the jungle. The hum of unseen insects, the shriek of distant predators, and the occasional wet pop of something being devoured in the shadows. He moved carefully, one gloved hand gripping his machete, the other scanning the bio-tracker on his wrist. The device pulsed with a faint blue rhythm, steady, deliberate. His target was close. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and pressed onward. His black and gray tactical armor clung to his muscular frame, already slick with humidity. Each step sunk into soft moss that squelched like flesh. Thorne was a man used to extremes, burned-out war zones, radiation storms, vacuum-boarding actions, but this jungle tested a different kind of endurance. It was patient, hungry, and old. Verdante, female mid-30s fugitive, he reminded himself, scanning the pulse. Lara Tavani, former elite Concord operative, now a ghost worth 50,000 credits, dead or alive. He didn't care much for the details, only for the payout. But something about this hunt had dug under his skin. Verdante were rare off their homeworld, emerald-skinned, silver-haired, graceful, and deadly. If the rumors were true, she wasn't just running from the law, she was running from the people who made the law. The bio-tracker blinked faster, Thorne crouched, muscles tensing, eyes narrowing beneath the HUD visor. Through a slit in the foliage ahead, movement flickered, a blur of green and silver darting like light through shadow. There she was. Lara Tavani moved with the fluidity of something born to the wild. Her lean, athletic form glided through the vines and roots with practiced ease. She wore a dark brown combat top that left her midriff bare, matching shorts secured by a utility belt and bracers strapped along her forearms. Even from this distance, she radiated presence, that alien mix of elegance and danger that marked her species. Thorne raised his stun rifle, aligning the crosshairs over her shoulder. End of the line, Tavani. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then the ground beneath her shifted. It was subtle, just a tremor, a ripple through the moss, but his instincts screamed trap. Move, he barked, though she couldn't hear him. The earth erupted in front of her. What looked like a massive flower bud tore open with a wet, sucking sound. 6 fleshy petals snapped outward, each lined with jagged, translucent spikes that glistened with venom. The air filled with the stench of rot and acid. Lara froze for one heartbeat too long. A thick vine shot from the ground, wrapping around her waist. She screamed, slashing at it with her combat knife, but the vine tightened, lifting her off her feet. The plant, a monstrous carnivorous blossom, began to pull her toward its gaping maw. Shit, Thorne hissed. Every rational part of him screamed to stand down, let the jungle collect his bounty, the easy way. He could take a DNA sample from the remains and still get paid. But then she screamed again, a raw, furious sound, half fear, half defiance, and something in him broke protocol. Goddamn hero complex, he growled. He dropped his pack and ran. The jungle closed in around him as he sprinted, cutting through walls of vines with brutal precision. Lara was fighting, slashing wildly as the plant reeled her in. Her emerald skin glistened with sweat in acid burns where droplets of digestive fluid had splattered. The air hissed as each drop hit the ground, sizzling through the soil. Hold on, Thorne shouted. She twisted at the sound, startled, disbelieving, and that moment of distraction nearly cost her. Another vine lashed toward her throat. Thorne intercepted it mid-swing, his machete flashing. The blade cut clean through, spraying black-green sap across his armor. The plant shrieked an inhuman sound that made the ground tremble. He pivoted, hacked through the vine around her legs, then the one gripping her torso. The severed appendages spasmed, twitching like severed nerves. Move, he barked, grabbing her arm and yanking her free. They stumbled backward together, nearly falling, as the enormous bloom snapped shut where she'd been seconds earlier. The sound was like thunder, wet and final. They tumbled into the ferns, panting, soaked in sweat and slime. For a moment, neither spoke. The jungle hissed and seethed around them, as if angry at their defiance. Then Laura pushed herself up on one elbow, silver hair plastered to her face, violet eyes burning. "You?" she gasped. "Major Mason Thorne. I should have known." Thorne was already reloading his sidearm, scanning the perimeter. "Save it," he said flatly, plants still moving. The carnivorous bloom shuddered its vines, retracting into the earth, bleeding black fluid that steamed on contact with the humid air. When it was finally still, Thorne lowered his weapon. "You're lucky I was close," he said without looking at her. Laura's laugh was bitter. "Lucky you were hunting me." He turned, then meeting her glare. Up close, she was striking alien and fierce, every line of her face sculpted for symmetry, her skin faintly luminescent beneath the jungle's filtered light. "Guess that makes us even," he said. "You'd be dead without me." "And I'll be dead because of you," she snapped, pushing to her feet. The movement made her wince. Acid burns still smoldered along her arm. Thorne took a step back, hand hovering near his blaster. "Not my problem," he said. "Yet." They stood there, two predators, breathing hard in the aftermath of chaos. The jungle watched in silence. Finally, Laura spoke again, her voice lower, steadier. "Why save me?" Thorne shrugged, shouldering his pack. "Didn't think, just acted." "That's not like you," she said quietly. "From what I've heard, the infamous Major Thorne only acts for credits." He smirked, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe you haven't heard everything." A distant roar echoed through the canopy, something massive, far off but moving closer. The ground trembled faintly under their boots. Laura's eyes darted toward the sound. "That's not over," she said. "No," Thorne agreed, checking his weapon. "And unless you want to meet the rest of this planet's digestive system, we move now." Reluctantly, she nodded. They pushed into the jungle together, a reluctant alliance born in blood and acid. The canopy swallowed them whole, leaving only the faint hiss of the wounded plant behind. As they disappeared into the green abyss, Thorne cast one last glance back. The place where the plant had struck was already healing, vines knitting over the torn ground like closing flesh. Nexus Prime didn't forgive. It merely waited for the next heartbeat. And as the last sliver of light faded above them, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that the planet itself was watching and smiling. By the time the twin suns sank below the horizon, the jungle of Nexus Prime had become something worse than darkness. It was alive. The canopy breathed. The trees groaned. The air shimmered with phosphorescent spores that floated like ghostly embers, drifting between the colossal trunks. Insects the size of fists sang their metallic dirge, and somewhere in the distance something screamed. Not prey, not predator, something in between. Laura Tavani followed the broad-shouldered human through the maze of vines and roots, her movements cautious, deliberate. He moved like a soldier, efficient, disciplined, every step measured. The kind of man who knew exactly how to kill and how to survive. "Keep up," Thorne muttered without turning. Her lips twisted. "You saved me, Major. That doesn't mean I take orders from you." "Fine," he said, brushing aside a branch thick as his arm. "Stay behind then. Let the jungle decide what's next." Her violet eyes flashed in the dim light, but she said nothing. For now, she followed. They found higher ground, a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow ravine filled with mist. It was as close to safety as Nexus Prime offered. Thorne scanned the area, dropped his pack, and began setting up camp with practiced efficiency. A compact shield generator, an emergency heat lamp, and a single kinetic barrier drone that projected a faint shimmer around the perimeter. "Military-grade," Laura noted, kneeling near the generator. "You pack light but expensive." He didn't look up. "Comes with the job." She sat back on her heels, watching him. "Bounty hunting." He paused. "Freelance acquisition." "That's what they're calling it now?" she asked, her voice like acid wrapped in silk. Thorne ignored the bait and lit a small fire using a portable igniter. The flame flickered low, casting amber light across his scarred face. Laura caught herself studying him, the hard lines of his jaw, the faint stubble, the faint shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of too many nights without sleep. When he finally looked up, their eyes met. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't what?" "Try to humanize me." She laughed, once sharp and bitter. "Believe me, Major, that was never the plan." Silence fell between them, thick as the jungle air. The fire crackled. Outside the faint shimmer of the shield, the night pulsed with distant movement, something slithering, something calling. Thorn checked his blaster, then glanced across the fire. Your burns need treatment. I've had worse. He tossed her a small cylinder from his kit. Military med foam works faster than pride. She hesitated, then caught it midair. The cylinder hissed as she sprayed it across her arm, the foam spreading into a thin silver layer that sealed the wounds. Relief softened her features for the first time. Thanks, she said quietly. Don't thank me, he replied. I still plan on turning you in. Laura looked up sharply. So why save me? Thorn shrugged. Maybe I wanted to hear your side first. She leaned back against the rock wall, watching the flickering flames dance across her emerald skin. My side, you already know what they told you. Treason, theft, murder. I also know when a file smells like politics, he said. And yours stinks. For a moment, her composure cracked. You think I wanted any of this? The Concord framed me. I tried to expose a corrupt admiral, and they buried me instead. Thorn didn't answer right away. He simply stared into the fire eyes, reflecting its orange glow. Finally, he said, if that's true, why run? Because the Concord doesn't make mistakes, she whispered. Only examples. A low rumble rolled across the sky, thunder distant but growing. The humidity thickened, the air charged with the metallic taste of an approaching storm. Thorn stood checking the sky. That storm will hit by dawn. We'll need shelter before then. She watched him move the way he scanned the perimeter, every motion precise. He was the kind of man who carried his ghost like extra ammo. Dangerous, predictable, comfortably human. I know a place, she said finally. A cave system west of here. I used it before they sent you. He looked back at her. Then we move at first light. Laura tilted her head. You trust me that easily? No, Thorn said, sitting again. But I trust self-preservation. The words earned the faintest hint of a smile from her. Practical. How very human of you. He glanced at her. Rule 1, he said, no weapons pointed at each other. I'll keep mine holstered if you do the same. Fair enough. Rule 2, we share intel about this jungle, about your case, anything that could get us killed. That's a lot to ask from someone you plan to deliver in chains. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Rule 3, convince me you're innocent, and maybe you won't have to wear them. Her gaze lingered on him, sharp assessing. You think you can judge innocence, Thorn? I can smell lies, he said simply. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. It hissed as it struck the shield barrier, turning into a halo of steam. The fire dimmed its light, reflecting off her damp skin. You really believe in justice, she asked. He snorted. No, but I believe in balance. Lightning flickered across the canopy, painting the jungle in white for an instant. In that moment, Laura saw something in his face, not cruelty, but exhaustion. A man who'd seen too much and still got up anyway. Maybe that was why he'd saved her. Maybe he didn't even know himself. The storm deepened. The fire sputtered. Laura shifted closer to the heat, wrapping her arms around her knees. You've been quiet, Thorn said after a while. Thinking. About what? About how easily this jungle could have swallowed me. About how easily you could have let it. He looked up. You're welcome. Don't flatter yourself, she replied, but her voice lacked bite. They fell into silence again. The rhythmic patter of rain, the hum of the shield, the pulse of alien thunder, it all blended into something almost peaceful. Then from deep within the jungle, a sound rose, low, guttural, wrong. Laura's head snapped up. That wasn't thunder. Thorn was already on his feet, blaster drawn. No, he said. That was something big. Movement rippled in the mist below trees, shifting leaves falling. A faint glow pulsed beneath the underbrush, like bioluminescent eyes moving in a pack. Stay inside the barrier, Thorn ordered, voice calm but tight. Laura stood beside him, drawing her sidearm. You think that thing respects barriers? Not if it's hungry enough. A shadow passed at the edge of the firelight, massive, silent, and gone in an instant. The rain masked its footsteps, but the vibrations through the rock told Thorn all he needed to know. Predator, he muttered. Laura's tone was grim. We're the only prey left alive tonight. For 10 minutes, they waited motionless, every muscle ready to strike. The sounds came closer, then stopped. The jungle exhaled. Finally, Thorn lowered his weapon slightly. It's gone. Or waiting. He met her eyes through the veil of rain. Then we wait too. They stayed like that until the storm faded, two killers beneath a dying fire caught between trust and suspicion, human and alien, predator and prey. When the first weak light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, Laura was the first to speak. I don't know what you're after, Major, she said softly, but you're walking into something much bigger than a bounty. Thorn holstered his blaster and slung his pack over his shoulder. Story of my life. They left the camp behind as the jungle awakened once more, the ground steaming where the rain had struck. Behind them, something moved in the shadows where they'd sat the night before, a ripple of motion, a gleam of eyes, then silence. Nexus Prime watched them go, and it was still hungry. By midday, the heat was savage enough to blur the edges of reality. Mist rose off the jungle floor like breath from some enormous beast, and the air shimmered with humidity so thick it clung to their lungs. Thorn moved first, cutting through the undergrowth with the efficiency of a man used to forging paths where none existed. Lara followed close behind, her light steps barely disturbing the moss-covered earth. For hours, they'd spoken little, only short-clipped exchanges when navigation demanded it. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was a taut wire strung between two predators who weren't sure whether to trust or strike. Your sense of direction better be worth sweating for, Thorn said, slicing through a curtain of vines. It is, Lara replied without missing a beat. You humans depend too much on scanners. The forest scrambles them. He frowned at his wrist display. Indeed, the bio-tracker was flickering in and out, the signal choked by interference. Convenient for you, necessary for me. They emerged from the foliage to the sound of rushing water, low at first, then growing until it drowned out the jungle's heartbeat. Before them stretched the Sarin River, a churning vein of turquoise, cutting through the wilderness like a living thing. Its current was swift, frothing white against black stones. That doesn't look friendly, Thorn said, kneeling at the bank. It's not, Lara confirmed. But we'll need to cross. There's higher ground on the other side. The caves I mentioned are beyond that ridge. He studied the river with a soldier's eye, the current's pull, the width of the gap, the slick algae on the rocks. We'll need a bridge. She crouched beside him, scanning the shoreline. Nexus bamboo, she said, pointing toward a cluster of tall, reed-like plants with metallic sheen. Flexible, stronger than steel cable when woven properly. Thorn raised a brow. You've done this before. Twice. Once with a team. Her tone darkened. Once alone. They set to work. Thorn cut the bamboo with clean, rhythmic strikes of his machete, while Lara stripped the fibers and began weaving them into long, sinewy cords. Their hands brushed occasionally, unintentional, quick, but each contact seemed to linger a fraction longer than it should. You're good with knots, Thorn said finally. She smirked. I used to tie down prisoners for interrogation. The technique transfers. He snorted. Remind me not to get on your bad side. I thought that's exactly where you were, she said, her voice a mix of humor and challenge. By the time the sun began to dip behind the canopy, they had a crude bridge, not elegant, but functional. Bamboo strands stretched taut across the river, anchored to gnarled roots on either side. The structure swayed slightly with the wind creaking like bones. Thorn tested the first step. It held. Well, Lara asked. He looked back at her, a faint grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Ladies first. She arched an eyebrow. You first. Strongest test the bridge. He shrugged. Fair. Thorn stepped on to the bridge, muscles tensing with each shift of the bamboo. It groaned under his weight but held firm. Halfway across, he called over his shoulder. Not bad for an outlaw engineer. Not bad for a bounty hunter with balance, she shot back, starting after him. The river roared beneath them, a living monster with white-fanged waves snapping at their heels. The sound swallowed everything, forcing them to communicate through instinct and motion. Then, without warning, one of the bamboo strands snapped. The sound was like a whip crack. Thorn lurched sideways, his boot slipping on the slick surface. Lara's eyes widened as he tilted toward the void. Then she lunged, catching his arm with both hands. The bridge shuddered under their combined weight, swinging wildly over the torrent. For a heartbeat, they dangled above the water faces, inches apart, both breathing hard. Let go, Thorn grunted. You'll fall with me. Not my style, she hissed, pulling. Muscles tensed her grip like steel despite her slender frame. He twisted, found footing, and together they hauled him back onto the bridge. They froze there for a moment, soaked in sweat, adrenaline roaring through their veins. The current thundered below like applause for their defiance. Now standing chest to chest, Lara whispered, Now we're even. Thorn smirked faintly. Keep score if you want. I stopped after the first life debt. They crossed the remaining distance slowly, every creak of bamboo reminding them how close they'd come. When their boots finally hit solid ground, both exhaled in relief. Then Lara stiffened. What is it? Thorn asked. Her gaze fixed on the river. Something massive moved beneath the surface, a dark shape cutting against the current with unnatural speed. "Don't move," she whispered. A low ripple broke the water's skin. Then a massive serpentine head rose, scales, glistening eyes glowing faint yellow. It was easily 20 feet long, a river predator evolved for ambush. Rows of needle-like teeth flashed as it broke the surface, jaws opening wide. "Run," Lara shouted. Thorn shoved her aside just as the creature lunged its jaws, snapping shut where she'd stood. Water exploded upward, drenching them both. He drew his blaster and fired twice. The first bolt glanced off the beast's armored hide. The second hit near its eye, earning a guttural roar. The creature thrashed tail, whipping across the bank. The impact caught Lara mid-stride and sent her flying into the river. Lara, without hesitation, Thorn dived in after her. The current seized him instantly, spinning him in churning foam. He fought his way through the water, scanning for the flash of silver hair. "Come on, come on." He saw her barely just before she vanished around a bend. He kicked hard, lungs burning, and caught her arms seconds later. She was conscious but gasping, clutching her pendant with one hand. "I've got you," he shouted over the roar. She nodded weakly, her voice lost to the river. Together they fought the current, dodging jagged rocks that tore at their armor and skin. After what felt like an eternity, the water calmed. Thorn dragged her toward a shallow bank, his arms trembling with exhaustion. They collapsed side by side on the sand, coughing up water, their hearts pounding in perfect sync. Lara rolled onto her back, staring up at the sky. "That's twice now," she said between ragged breaths. Thorn chuckled hoarsely. "Who's counting?" They lay there in silence, the adrenaline ebbing. The storm clouds were gathering again, above the canopy, purple streaks flashing in their depths. Finally, Thorn sat up, glancing down at her. "You okay?" "I'll live?" She smiled faintly, wiping water from her face. "Apparently you're good at keeping me that way." "Don't get used to it," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. She sat up beside him, their shoulders brushing. The contact was light, accidental, but neither moved away. For a long moment, the only sound was the river murmuring beside them, tamed for now, but still alive, waiting for another chance to kill. Thorn looked across the water, then at the faint ridge rising in the distance. "That cave of yours still there?" Lara followed his gaze. "If the jungle hasn't eaten it, yes. Then that's where we're heading next." She nodded. "Good, because this planet's appetite is only getting started." As they rose, the first drops of rain began to fall again, soft, metallic, and cold. The jungle, it seemed, was never done testing them. By the time they reached the foothills, the storm had grown monstrous. Lightning split the violet sky into jagged wounds of light. Thunder rolled like artillery across the jungle, shaking leaves from the canopy. Rain fell not in drops but in sheets, hammering the ground until rivers formed in minutes. "Move," Lara shouted over the storm, pointing toward a dark fissure ahead. The caves. Thorn followed her through the downpour mud, sucking at his boots armor, drenched and heavy. The wind howled, bending the trees like they were made of bone. He could barely see more than a few feet ahead, just the flash of her silver hair glinting each time lightning tore the sky apart. They reached the cave entrance, seconds before the full fury of the storm hit. The wind roared like a beast denied its prey as they stumbled inside, dripping and gasping. The cave widened quickly, its walls smooth and dark, reflecting the pale light of Thorn's wrist torch. The air was cool and dry, a sudden blessed contrast to the chaos outside. "Made it," he said, breathless. Lara didn't answer. She was kneeling near the wall, rummaging through a hidden crevice. When she turned back, she held a compact pack sealed and dusted with age. "You stashed supplies here?" he asked. "Several bolt holes," she said. "You don't survive 3 months on the run without planning ahead." She unrolled a portable light source and set it near the wall. Soft amber light filled the chamber, chasing shadows into the cracks. Thorn scanned the interior, a high vaulted ceiling, walls etched with faint flowing patterns that shimmered when the light touched them. It looked wrong for natural stone, almost deliberate. "What's with the carvings?" "Not carvings," Lara said quietly. "Nexus formations. There's old tech under this mountain long before any of us came here." Thorn raised a brow. "That's supposed to comfort me." She smirked faintly. "Only if you think the dead are better company than the living." Outside, thunder cracked again, close enough to make the cave tremble. Lara activated a small heating module from her pack. A warm glow spread outward, steaming the rain from their clothes. She looked down at herself, soaked through her combat gear, clinging like a second skin. Her bioluminescent markings glimmered faintly beneath the damp fabric. "We should get out of these wet clothes," she said, her tone practical but her eyes flickering with discomfort. "Hypothermia is a risk even here." Thorne hesitated. He'd faced death 1,000 ways, but somehow undressing next to a fugitive alien woman felt more dangerous than all of them combined. "Right," he said, finally turning away. "Practical." They worked in silence, backs turned each, pretending the other didn't exist. Armor plates clattered. Fabric rustled. The storm outside filled the silence between heartbeats. When he turned back, she was crouched near the heater, spreading her wet clothes to dry. The amber light played across her skin, smooth emerald, alive with shifting luminescent lines that pulsed in rhythm with her breathing. He froze before he could stop himself. Verdante physiology, he thought. The markings. They're alive. She caught him staring and arched a brow, admiring the view, Major. He didn't look away. Tactical assessment. Her lips curved. Assess quieter then. He sat opposite her near the small heater. The warmth seeped into his muscles, loosening the tension of the last few days. For a moment, they were just two survivors in a storm, listening to the rain beat futilely against the cave's mouth. Laura unwrapped a small bundle of dried rations, hungry. He nodded. She tossed him a piece without looking up. They ate in silence. The food was bland, compressed protein wafers, but it tasted like relief. Finally, Thorne broke the silence. "Why the Concord bounty? What did you do that pissed them off enough to hire me?" She chewed slowly, then said, "I found something I wasn't supposed to. Proof that Admiral Harkness, the golden tentacle of the Octavian High Command, was selling Concord defense algorithms to the Krell Dominion." Thorne's expression hardened. "You reported it." "Of course," she said bitterly. "Through proper channels. Within a week, my team was reassigned, my files wiped, and my name flagged for treason. They made me the leak. Easier to erase one Verdante than admit corruption at the top." He stared into the firelight, jaw tight. "I served under Harkness once. Never liked him. Too clean. Too many medals for battles that ended dirty." Her eyes flicked up. "So you believe me?" "I believe anyone who's had the system turn on them," he said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain softened outside, replaced by the occasional rumble of thunder rolling through the valley. Laura leaned back against the wall, watching the flicker of the heater's flame reflect in Thorne's eyes. "You're not like the stories say," she murmured. He glanced at her. "Story. The relentless human bounty hunter. Cold, efficient, no hesitation." She tilted her head. "You hesitate a lot." He gave a faint smile. "That's how you stay alive." She studied him, her expression softening. "And yet you saved me." He didn't answer. "Why, Thorne?" She pressed, voice low. "Why risk your life for someone who's supposed to be your payday?" He looked at her for a long time before replying. "Instinct. That's not a reason. It's the only one that matters," he said. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It pulsed, charged alive. Lightning flashed outside, lighting up the cave in stark blue-white. For an instant, the patterns on the wall and the ones on her skin seemed to glow in unison. Thorne noticed. "Your markings, they react to the storm. Verdante bioluminescence is tied to emotion and electromagnetic activity," she said softly. "It's complicated." "Beautiful," he said before he could stop himself. She blinked surprised, then smiled small and sincere. "You're not so bad when you forget to be human." The heater hummed. The storm raged. The air between them thickened until even the silence felt like contact. She moved closer, not touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. "You ever wonder," she said quietly, "if we're just following the wrong orders, our whole lives, all the time?" Her eyes searched his. "Then maybe it's time we stop." The next flash of lightning illuminated their faces inches apart, two soldiers on opposite sides of a war neither believed in anymore. When their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was the collision of exhaustion, defiance, and unspoken need. The storm outside seemed to answer thunder booming like the sky itself had cracked open. For a moment, there was nothing but heat and breath and the soft glow of her markings flaring brighter with every heartbeat. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." He smiled faintly. "Too late to take it back." She laughed quietly, a sound he realized he hadn't heard since the jungle. Outside, the rain began to fade, the storm's rage subsiding into a low, steady rhythm. Laura rested her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Mason Thorne didn't feel like a man running from his past. He felt still. And somewhere deep beneath them, in the hidden veins of the Nexus mountain, something ancient stirred, as if recognizing the spark between them and deciding it was worth watching. Dawn came reluctantly to Nexus Prime, seeping through the jungle canopy in ghostly shafts of violet light. The storm had passed, but the air was still heavy with its memory damp, metallic charged. Thorn woke first. Years of soldiering had trained him to surface from sleep instantly, senses already scanning before his eyes opened. The cave was quiet except for the faint hum of the portable heater. Lara lay a few feet away, curled on her side, her silver hair fanned out like spilled moonlight. He sat up slowly, watching her for a moment. There was something disarming about her like this, the warrior stripped away, replaced by something fiercely alive yet vulnerable. Morning, she murmured without opening her eyes. Thorn smirked. You always wake up like you've been awake the whole time. It's a survival habit, she said, stretching. I learned from humans. He chuckled. I'm flattered. She pushed herself up and began reassembling her gear. We need to move, she said. The storm masked our trail, but they'll find us soon. Concord trackers don't stop. Thorn nodded. I figured as much. He retrieved his own pack and began securing his equipment, every motion methodical. When he reached for his rifle, Lara froze. What, he asked? Listen. A faint pulse echoed through the air, rhythmic, mechanical, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't coming from the jungle. It was coming from deeper within the cave. Lara frowned, walking toward one of the side passages. That's not natural. Thorn followed her, weapon raised. You said this place sits on old Nexus tech, right? She nodded, touching the faintly glowing lines along the wall. It's resonating. Something's active again. The pulse grew stronger the farther they went. The narrow tunnel opened into a massive chamber that took Thorn's breath away. It was a cathedral of light and shadow. Crystalline structures jutted from the walls like frozen lightning. At the center stood a towering console, ancient alien alive. Its surface shimmered with patterns of light, shifting in ways that felt almost biological. By the stars, Lara whispered, stepping forward. A Nexus relay. Thorn scanned the structure. You mean communication tech? More than that, she said, her voice trembling with awe. The builders used relays like this to transmit data across entire galaxies. If it still works, we could broadcast your evidence, Thorn finished. She nodded, straight to Conquer Command. No filters, no interception. Once it's out there, they can't bury it. He approached the console cautiously. Can you make it work? I think so, she said, already setting her pack down. She pulled out her pendant, a small crystal faintly glowing. This contains the encrypted data. It just needs a carrier signal. Thorn glanced toward the tunnel. We should move fast. That noise will draw attention. Lara gave a tight nod and began working. Her fingers danced over the alien interface, the crystal responding to her touch like a living organism. The console pulsed brighter, filling the chamber with shifting hues of gold and blue. Systems initializing, she said. It's recognizing the encryption matrix. How long? 5 minutes, maybe less. Thorn took position near the entrance, rifle ready. His instincts prickled. The air felt wrong, too still. Then faintly at first he heard it, the crunch of boots on stone. They're here, he said. Lara didn't look up. Buy me time. He moved to the choke point where the tunnel narrowed, deploying a small sonic disruptor. The device emitted a low whine before releasing a pulse that made the walls vibrate. Somewhere in the distance, shouts echoed. Thorn crouched calm, focused. 3 shadows appeared at the far end, armored figures moving with military precision. He threw the disruptor. It clattered against the stone and detonated the blast, stunning the operatives. Thorn fired 3 quick shots, striking the lead soldier's weapon and bringing down a section of the ceiling. Rocks cascaded, blocking the passage. He ducked back as debris rained down. That'll slow them, he muttered. Transmission's at 60%, Lara called. Make it faster, he grunted, moving to another tunnel. He rigged a small explosive charge, not lethal, just enough to create confusion. The first explosion echoed moments later, followed by the crack of return fire. Blaster bolts sizzled against the rock. Thorn fired back his shots, precise, controlled. Mason, Lara shouted. He turned. She was bathed in light now, the console flaring around her. It's working, she said, awe and fear mixing in her voice. The relay's broadcasting. A blaster bolt grazed Thorn's side, spinning him into the wall. He cursed, gritting his teeth, as pain flared hot and sharp. He fired blind down the tunnel, forcing the attackers to retreat. Transmission complete in 30 seconds. You've got 20, he growled. The ceiling above the main entrance began to crack. Dust rained down as another explosion shook the complex. Lara's fingers flew over the interface. Come on, come on! A final pulse of light surged through the console and a clear tone rang out harmonic, pure and final. It's done, she gasped. The data's out. Every Concord frequency just received it. Thorne stumbled toward her, clutching his side. Good. Now we leave before they... A deafening crash cut him off as the barricade behind them exploded. Concord operatives poured through the gap, black armor silver insignias glinting in the dim light. Move! He shouted, pulling Lara behind a pillar as blaster fire filled the chamber. The relay's crystalline surfaces refracted the shots into beams of prismatic energy. One struck the console, sending a ripple through the entire structure. Lara's eyes widened. They hit the relay. It's destabilizing. The hum turned into a rising whine. The ground trembled. Run! They sprinted toward an adjoining tunnel as the chamber behind them erupted in a cascade of blue-white energy. The shock wave threw them forward, dust and debris chasing them like a living wall. They crashed into another chamber, coughing half-blind. Thorne grabbed Lara's arm, dragging her to her feet. You okay? She nodded, shaken but alive. The transmission? It's gone through, but the relay? Forget the relay, he said. We're not dying here. They pressed on through the narrow corridor. The light from the blast flickered behind them like the heartbeat of a dying star. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a smaller circular room, quieter, cooler, untouched by the chaos above. In the center stood a raised platform covered in the same shifting patterns. Lara stopped dead. Thorne, look. He followed her gaze. Another relay. No, she whispered, voice trembling. A transport node, a matter transmitter. Like teleportation. Something like that. The builders used them to move across worlds. Thorne raised an eyebrow. Can you make it work? She hesitated, brushing her fingers over the glowing surface. Maybe. The system needs calibration. It's designed for Verdante biosignatures. It'll take time to adjust for two. How much time? Too much. Blaster fire echoed again in the distance, closer this time. Thorne checked his weapon. Then we'll make time. He moved toward the tunnel entrance, setting his last explosive charge. The small device blinked green. When they get through, this'll slow them. Lara was already working at the console, her pendant glowing brighter than ever. The transport's responding, she called. But it's asking for synchronization. Thorne frowned. What does that mean? She looked at him and he saw fear and something else flicker in her eyes. It needs a link between us, a shared energy signature. He stared at her for a moment, realization dawning. The storm, the bond. Lara nodded. Our contact created a residual energy field. It's reading us as one. Outside, boots echoed down the tunnel. Then let's use it, Thorne said, stepping onto the platform beside her. The light flared the patterns, shifting under their feet. The console hummed, building to a crescendo. Lara's hand found his. Mason, trust me, he said. The first blaster bolt hit the wall behind them. The second never landed. The world turned to light. For a moment, there was nothing but weightlessness, sound collapsing into silence. Then the cave, the gunfire, the jungle, all of it fell away. They were gone. The light faded slowly like dawn bleeding through a storm. Thorne blinked against the afterimage, his body still humming with residual energy. The air was cool, impossibly still after the chaos of the explosion, and smelled faintly of ozone and something ancient, something metallic and alive. When his vision cleared, his breath caught. They were standing in a vast chamber, unlike anything he had ever seen. The ceiling soared 30 meters overhead, curving into a dome of translucent crystal that shimmered with the glow of twin suns streaming through it. The walls pulsed with light, rhythmic, deliberate, like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. Lara stood beside him, wide-eyed. A Nexus sanctuary, she breathed. It's real. The platform beneath them was inscribed with shifting glyphs that responded to her presence, flaring softly under her bare feet. Thorne turned in a slow circle. You've got a talent for finding trouble, he said. Or history, she countered. This is where the builders operated from the source of their network. The central console dominated the space, a massive structure of crystal and metal intertwined like roots and veins. Energy pulsed through it, humming in tones too low to be sound but deep enough to be felt. Lara stepped toward it as if in a trance. It's awake, she whispered. We must have triggered a reactivation sequence during the transport. Thorn followed, scanning the chamber for movement. You think it's safe? She smiled faintly. Nothing about Nexus Prime is safe, but this is different. It's not hostile, it's aware. Before he could answer, a new sound cut through the stillness, a low, mechanical hum from behind them. Don't move, a voice said. Thorn spun, blaster raised. At the far end of the chamber stood a figure, tall, angular, unmistakable. The eight-limbed silhouette was framed by the glow of a secondary portal. Two arms held disruptor pistols. The others rested in that unnervingly calm Octavian posture. Admiral Harkness, Thorn growled. The alien's skin shimmered like oil, his eyes a mosaic of shifting gold. Impressive, isn't it, Major? You truly believed you were the first to stumble upon a Nexus sanctuary. How? Did I follow you? Harkness finished for him, his voice a smooth purr that carried across the chamber. The builder's pathways are old, but not forgotten. You simply activated what my agents spent years trying to locate. Lara's hand went instinctively to her pendant. You murdered thousands for this, she spat. You sold defense algorithms to the Krell so they'd let you hunt for Nexus technology unchecked. Harkness spread his upper arms in mock offense. I expanded the Concord's reach, Agent Tavani. You should be thanking me. This sanctuary holds power beyond imagination. Communication, transportation, perhaps even creation. His tone lowered, almost reverent. The builders weren't gods. They were engineers who touched divinity, and now their tools belong to us. Us, Thorn said. You mean you? The Octavian smiled. Semantics. Thorn stepped forward, blaster trained on the Admiral's chest. You won't get away with it. Lara broadcasted the evidence. Every Concord channel's seen it by now. Ah, yes. Harkness's facial tendrils twitched amusement, an impressive feat of desperation. Unfortunately, without the decryption key, your message is little more than noise. He turned one of his weapons toward Lara. You have something that belongs to me. Thorn shifted, placing himself between them. You want her, you'll have to shoot through me. Harkness's lower arms flexed ready. I was hoping you'd say that. Before he could fire, the floor beneath them pulsed a deep, resonant thrum that made the entire chamber vibrate. The central console flared, responding to something unseen. Lara gasped. The sanctuary is responding to us, Harkness snarled. To me, you mean? But Thorn could feel it, the subtle pull in his chest, the same hum that had bound him to Lara since the storm. The air shimmered between them, threads of light weaving faintly, connecting him to her and to the console itself. What's happening? He asked. The Nexus recognizes the bond, Lara said, voice trembling with awe. Our connection. It's acting like a key. Harkness fired. The shot struck the floor near Thorn's feet, scattering shards of crystal. He dove aside, returning fire. The bolts ricocheted through the chamber, refracting off mirrored surfaces into streaks of energy that carved glowing scars into the walls. Lara sprinted toward the console, clutching the pendant. I can use it, she shouted. If I link the sanctuary's core to the broadcast signal, I can send the decryption key. Thorn fired again, forcing Harkness behind a crystalline column. Do it! The Admiral's laughter echoed cold and amused. You think you can outpace me in my own game? I've studied this technology for decades. Funny, Thorn called back, reloading. Still can't shoot straight. Harkness's response was a barrage of blaster fire. Lara slammed the pendant into a slot at the center of the console. The room blazed with light. Energy poured through the chamber, swirling around her in ribbons of gold and violet. Her markings flared, mirroring the console's glow. Thorn felt it too, the energy crawling across his skin, racing through his veins, connecting him to her, to the sanctuary, to everything. Lara, she looked back at him, eyes glowing brighter than the lightning outside. Trust me. He nodded. The console released a sound not mechanical, but harmonic, like 1,000 voices singing a single note. The light from the floor rose into columns that converged above the platform, forming a translucent sphere around them. Harkness fired again, but the bolt stopped midair, frozen in the glow. His expression twisted in disbelief. What? Lara's voice carried clear and resonant. You wanted power, Admiral? Here it is. The light surged outward, washing across the chamber like a wave. Harkness screamed, not in pain, but in outrage, as the energy wrapped around him, suspending him mid-motion. His body froze, encased in a field of crackling stasis. For a long heartbeat, everything was still. Then the glow dimmed, leaving only the soft pulse of the console and the faint hum of the Nexus system stabilizing. Thorn lowered his blaster slowly. You stop time. Not exactly, Lara said, breathing hard. Temporal suspension. The builders used it to contain anomalies. He's frozen alive, but trapped between seconds. Thorne approached the field, studying the Admiral's suspended form. Guess we found the right punishment. Lara smiled weakly, Justice Nexus style. He turned to her. What about the transmission? It's done, she said, touching the console. The key's been sent. The Concorde has everything, the evidence, the coordinates, the full record. Harknex's empire just collapsed. Thorne exhaled, a rare, genuine laugh escaping him. Remind me never to underestimate you again. Her glow softened. I'll consider that a compliment. They stood together in the dim light of the sanctuary. Outside the crystal dome, twin suns rose higher, their rays cutting through the haze like golden blades. For the first time, the jungle beyond the mountains looked peaceful. Lara reached for her pendant and pressed it into his hand. Keep it. He frowned. Why? Because it's no longer just data, she said. It's our key. The Nexus recognizes us, both of us. Whatever happens next, we're connected to this. Thorne looked down at the crystal, feeling its faint pulse. And if that connection breaks, her lips curved into a small smile. Then the universe might just stop listening. Before he could respond, she winced, a hand instinctively going to her abdomen. Lara, she shook her head quickly. I'm fine, it's just... She hesitated, eyes softening. Verdante physiology is sensitive to change. The Nexus bond must have amplified it. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You mean, she met his gaze and nodded, and life, new life. For the first time in years, Mason Thorne, soldier mercenary cynic, was speechless. He placed a hand over hers, over the faint glow beneath her palm. Guess we've got more than one future to protect now. Her eyes shimmered. Then we better start by surviving the present. Together they turned toward the frozen Admiral. The Nexus hum deepened, responding to their presence. What do we do with him? Thorne asked. Let the Concorde find him, Lara said. The evidence will lead them here, and this time they'll see the truth for themselves. Thorne nodded, slipping the pendant around his neck. Then let's give them something worth finding. They walked hand in hand toward the console. The chamber's light brightened in response, as though recognizing the start of something new. Outside, the jungle exhaled. The wind shifted. For the first time since the builders vanished, Nexus Prime was awake, and it remembered. 3 months later, the storm had long passed, but its echoes had rewritten the stars. The Nexus Sanctuary had become more than a ruin. It was a monument reborn. Once a tomb of forgotten power, it now thrummed with life. Conquered researchers, scientists, and envoys moved carefully across its platforms, studying the glowing conduits and suspended crystals that once terrified them. The builder's technology had survived the centuries. Now, under new stewardship, it would serve a different purpose: connection, not control. Mason Thorne leaned against the transparent railing of the observation deck, the twin suns reflecting off his dark uniform. His insignia was new Director of Security, Nexus Research Outpost 1, but the scars beneath it were old. He'd traded his mercenary armor for a sleeker, tactical coat, though he still carried the same knife strapped to his thigh, a habit he wasn't ready to break. Below him, teams of engineers worked beside Verdante scientists, their emerald skin and glowing patterns blending with the faint blue light of the Nexus systems. Humans and Verdante, two species that only months ago distrusted each other deeply, now worked side by side in cautious cooperation. At the center of it all stood Lara Tavani. She moved through the crowd with quiet authority, her silver hair braided back, her form clad in a modified Verdante Concorde uniform designed to accommodate the gentle curve of her abdomen. Her markings glowed faintly beneath the fabric, pulsing with life. Their child, was growing fast. Thorne smiled to himself, watching her gesture toward a cluster of glowing conduits. Even now, she commanded attention without raising her voice. She wasn't just a fugitive anymore. The Conquered had cleared her name after Harknex's arrest and public trial. The evidence she and Thorne had broadcast from the Nexus Sanctuary had shattered his entire network. Over a dozen senior officials exposed the old hierarchy uprooted. Lara Tavani was no longer wanted. She was needed. He felt her presence before she spoke. Still standing guard over me, Mage. He turned, finding her at his side, arms folded, that familiar wry smile tugging at her lips. Old habits, he said. Someone's got to keep the diplomats from breaking something expensive. She laughed softly. You mean like an ancient alien relay system that nearly vaporized us? Exactly like that, he replied. For a moment, they just looked out over the chamber, the hum of activity below the glow of the twin suns beyond the crystal dome. It's strange, Laura said quietly. 3 months ago, this place was a myth. Now it's the most secure installation in conquered space. Funny how survival turns into paperwork, Thorne said. She smiled, brushing her fingers lightly against his hand. You've adapted surprisingly well to Peace Mason Thorne. He smirked. Don't spread that rumor. I've got a reputation to maintain. Her gaze softened. You have a new one now, the human who helped save the Concorde and fathered the first hybrid child in recorded history. Quite the legacy. He looked down, suddenly uncomfortable. Legacy's a fancy word for trouble waiting to happen. You don't believe that, she said. You believe in balance. You said so yourself. He turned to meet her violet eyes. Yeah, balance. You and me, we make a good one. She smiled, not the quick, guarded smirk she used to wear, but something gentler, deeper. That we do. A chime echoed through the sanctuary. Director Thorne said, a calm, synthetic voice over the intercom. Incoming vessel on approach vector, Theta 7. Conquered diplomatic transponder confirmed. Laura's markings brightened instantly. They're here. Your parents, Thorne guessed. She nodded, taking a steadying breath. And half the Verdante Council. Apparently introducing them to the man who saved their daughter and impregnated her is a matter of political and scientific importance. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds fun. She shot him a look. Don't start. Wouldn't dream of it. He offered her his arm. Shall we? Laura hesitated for just a heartbeat, then took it. Let's. The docking bay gleamed with polished metal and alien crystal. The massive doors opened with a hiss as the Concorde diplomatic vessel settled onto the platform, its hull bearing the Verdante crest, a spiral of intertwined light and shadow. A ramp descended, and out stepped two figures flanked by Verdante honor guards. Her father was tall and imposing, his skin a deep emerald streaked with silver, his eyes sharp with intellect. Her mother, by contrast, radiated warmth, her bioluminescent patterns flowing in soft rhythmic waves. Lara Tavani, her father said formally as he approached. You've caused quite a stir. Laura inclined her head. I tend to have that effect. His gaze shifted to Thorne. The man's posture stiffened instinctively, years of combat training kicking in. This is him, I assume. Admiral Mason Thorne, she said. Former bounty hunter, current protector, future, she hesitated, then smiled. Partner. Her father's expression was unreadable, human. Thorne met his gaze without flinching, guilty as charged. There was a long pause. Then, to Thorne's surprise, the elder Verdante extended his hand. You exposed Harknex. You saved my daughter's life. That earns respect, whatever your species. Thorne took the offered hand firmly. Appreciate it. Laura's mother stepped forward, then her markings bright with emotion. May I? She asked softly, looking at Laura's abdomen. Laura smiled and nodded. Her mother placed a hand gently over the curve, her expression transforming into wonder. 2 heartbeats, she whispered, harmonized. Thorne swallowed hard, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a sacred moment. Laura reached back and caught his hand, pulling him close. You're part of this, she said quietly. Her father cleared his throat, stepping back. There will be questions from both our governments. But for now, congratulations. Thank you, Thorne said, genuinely surprised. Laura's mother smiled up at him. Humans may be impulsive, but your hearts are strong. That at least gives me hope. Thorne grinned faintly. We have our moments. Later that evening, the Nexus Sanctuary's great hall was filled with light. Concord and Verdante officials mingled, scientists argued cheerfully, and technicians toasted to improbable survival. The air hummed with a rare thing optimism. Thorne stood at the edge of the crowd, a glass of something alien and glowing faintly in his hand. He wasn't used to celebrations. He preferred clean exits, quiet nights, the hum of an engine, and the promise of distance. But as he looked across the hall at Laura laughing with a group of Verdante scholars, the faint shimmer of her markings reflecting off the crystal walls, he realized that maybe, just maybe, some places were worth staying. A young human officer approached. Director Thorne, message for you, priority channel. Thorne took the data pad, frowning as he read the transmission. From Conhard, Central Command. Subject classified Project Nexus Directive. Immediate establishment of a joint research division under Verdante human leadership. Appointees, Dr. Lara Tavani, Chief of Research. Mason Thorne, Director of Operations. He looked up at Lara across the room and couldn't help but smile. Of course, they weren't done yet. Hours later, when the crowd had thinned and the stars hung bright above the crystal dome, they found themselves alone again, standing where it all began beneath the central console of the sanctuary. Lara traced a hand along the smooth surface, her reflection fractured in the crystalline glow. "We've changed everything," she said softly. Thorn stepped beside her. She looked up at him. "You cut me out of that plant, Mason. You could have walked away." "But you didn't. Every choice since then, mine yours, brought us here." He smiled faintly. "Not sure if that makes me a hero or just bad at quitting. Maybe both." They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the low hum of the Nexus beneath them. "Do you ever think about what's next?" he asked quietly. Lara placed a hand over her stomach where faint light shimmered beneath her skin. "Every day. For all of us." Thorn nodded, then wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." Outside, lightning flickered in the distant clouds, not a storm this time, but the silent pulse of the Nexus network reawakening across the stars. 1,000 dormant relays scattered through forgotten worlds were stirring, linked once more to the sanctuary through the signal Lara had unleashed. And somewhere far beyond the reach of Concord's space, a faint voice answered in return. The builders were listening. Lara turned her head against Thorn's chest, smiling softly. "You hear that?" He nodded. "Yeah, the universe just got louder." She laughed quietly, and the sound echoed through the chamber like light, soft, alive, endless. For the first time in history, human and Verdante stood as equals, not conqueror, and subject, not hunter and prey, but something new entirely. Partners. And as the twin suns rose again over Nexus Prime, casting their light across the crystal dome, the future opened before them, vast, uncertain, and bright. The storm had ended. The legend had just begun.